Hello and good evening, Next Gen. Thank you for tuning in to our daily devotional. Tonight we are wrapping up the series on David and Solomon. I hope you've enjoyed this. I know that I've enjoyed going through it with you. At this point, I hope it's given you really an almost a sense of urgency to do more in the kingdom, but not only to do more in the kingdom, but to trust that God is going to provide for you and that God is going to take you through your calling and your gifts, and really giving you a burden to seek God's wisdom and seek true discernment in each and every season of your life, whether it be something as simple as making a decision into what class you're going to take, or something like buying a vehicle, or even what school you may end up going to in the future, what career path you may take, and how you focus on using that to further the kingdom of God. So tonight we're going to finish up with Solomon and just kind of talk about wisdom and how a wise answer really begets more wisdom. So hearing God's voice, it's an excellent start. And we talked about that this week. Is what we've really been focusing on, is how to hear the voice of God and what that may sound like in our lives and how we even get to that point. But hearing God's voice, that's not where the story ends. Sometimes God gives instructions and the proper response is a hearty, "Yes, Lord, yes," followed by diligent obedience. So I want you to always remember, it's truly impossible to say no, Lord, because if He is the Lord of your life, you will always respond with a yes, and that would be for any request that He makes of you. Anytime God asks you to do something, your response should be, "Yes, Lord." At other times, when God asks us a question, we have multiple options on how to respond. Certainly, as we've learned, God asked Solomon what he wanted, and Solomon could have responded in any number of appropriate ways. "God, I want more riches. God, I want more wives," even though he had 600 and some wives. "God, I want these physical things." A blank check from the Lord should not be used to settle personal grudges against others. Remember, Solomon could have asked for his enemies to be wiped off the face of the earth. Whatever it was, God told him, ask whatever. So remember, we're here to pray for others, even those that despitefully use us. So this is exampled when the disciples asked Jesus for permission to call fire to fall from heaven and destroy the people that had rejected him in Luke 9:55. Jesus responded by telling them, "Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of." So while God will ultimately punish the wicked, we must remember that it's His choice and not ours. Just like we talked about last night. These people that we feel like use us or lie on us or do whatever, these are not our true enemies. Who's our enemy? Well, the devil. The devil is our eternal enemy. So God determines who He judges and when He judges. He's called us to walk with compassion and to respond with humility, just as we see was revealed in Solomon's response to the Lord's offer. In 1 Kings 3:9, it says, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people?" We talked about that I believe it was on Monday. Solomon did not ask for a long life, like many of us probably would, but he received it. Solomon did not ask for massive wealth, but he obtained it. The story implies God would have granted him long life or riches if he would have asked, but Solomon displayed selfless humility and asked for an understanding heart. And this is what we commonly refer to as wisdom. Solomon is known as being the wisest man to have ever lived. He had kings and queens that would travel far and wide just to kind of pick his brain and to learn the things that he knew that God had given him the wisdom for. So as a result of him asking for this wisdom, he was rewarded with both a long life and financial gain as a bonus. God gave him those things because he passed the test. Just like we learned a few nights ago, surely this was a test from God that he passed. Consider how impressive this Solomon's request really was. Not only did he frame the request in a way that revealed his true motive, to rightfully be able to lead the nation of Israel, he also acknowledged that they are a great people and a people who belong to the Lord. Just like he says in 1 Kings 3:9, give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? It's commonly said that no one can be a great leader unless they are first an effective follower. Because Solomon followed God, he was able to lead the nation of Israel into a place of great wealth and influence. And he done a fantastic job up until his older age. There was one additional piece of information that's commonly overlooked. There was one condition upon which those promises would depend. God conditioned his promises on Solomon's obedience. 1 Kings 3:14 says, and if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. So as we go on into Kings, 1 Kings 11:1-8, I urge you to read it. For sake of time, I'll kind of give you the idea of it. Solomon failed to walk in God's ways. He, in his later years, he allowed his 600 and how many ever wives to lead him astray. And Solomon brought wives from different countries, different religions, different places, and he thought that he would outsmart them. He wouldn't fall to their ways. But in his older age, he ended up allowing them to speak into his life, and he ended up following their gods, and he was led astray in his later years and ended up building temples to these other gods. So just Pastor made a post the other day. It really does matter who you marry, but that's another lesson for another time. But we must be like Solomon in one respect, responding to the Lord with selfless humility. But we must refuse to follow Solomon's example of disobedience. We should think of our responsibility when we hear from God as involving three parts. Listening to his voice, like we've talked about over the past few nights, truly seeking the voice of God. Respond with selfless humility and obey his instructions and endure till the end. That's what will set you apart from everyone else in your life. And you can save yourself a lot of heartache by listening to his voice, responding with selfless humility, and obeying his instructions and enduring those instructions till the end. So while wisdom is helpful for common everyday task of life, it's not often appreciated in the midst of a seemingly impossible situation. Solomon found himself facing a dilemma just almost as soon as he takes on this new wisdom. And it has become one of the most famous examples of his wisdom on display. And you probably already know what I'm talking about. So one role of Israel's rulers traditionally that they filled was that of a judge. So one day, two prostitutes approached Solomon with a serious problem. As a judge, Solomon was tasked to listen to their testimony and determining which woman was telling the truth and which one was telling a lie. So both women were mothers of newborn infants, and they all lived in the same house. According to one woman, she fell asleep with her baby in her arms, awoke to discover the child that in her arms was dead. And upon close examination of the baby, she discovered that the baby was not hers. And she assumed that the other woman had smothered her child unintentionally during the night. So she allegedly switched the babies to steal the healthy child from her real mother. It's a crazy scenario. The second woman claimed that she was lying, and the mother of the dead child was attempting to steal the baby that she currently held instead of telling the truth and saying that it belonged to her. She said that the other lady was lying. Solomon was faced with this crazy situation. No witness could be called, or back then there was no, as far as I know, there was no DNA testing. There was no DNA evidence that could be used to determine which woman was telling the truth. The life of the future baby was at stake, as well as Solomon's reputation as a God-called, God-ordained ruler of Israel. So only by the wisdom received from God could Solomon determine the real mother without the aid of expert witnesses or evidence. His solution was equally unconventional and effective. It was, imagine being put in this situation where you have to just determine whose baby this is. For me, when I see an infant, especially newborns, everybody's like, oh, it looks like the mother. Oh, it looks like the father. No, it doesn't. They're lying. It looks like a baby. They all look just like a baby. I've never seen a newborn child that looks anything like mother, father, whatever. They all look like babies. So I couldn't imagine being in this situation and trying to determine which mother the baby belonged to. So 1 Kings 3:24 and 25 says, and the king said, bring me a sword. And so they brought a sword to the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. Very fair scenario. Hey, listen, you guys can't figure out whose baby this is. Surely we'll just go ahead and cut it in half. We'll give each of you half of this living baby, and you can take it and do with it as you will. Solomon understood that the prospect of both children being dead would not bother the mother who was lying as much as it would the real mother of the child who survived the night. Luckily, he was correct. The real mother cried out and willingly sacrificed her role as the mother in order to save the life of the baby. The woman who was lying had no such reaction, as she was satisfied just knowing her roommate would no longer have what she did not have. She basically said, that's great, cut the baby in half, that way nobody gets the baby. I'm fine with that. But the true mother said, no, just let her have the baby. Do not take the infant's life. Let her have the baby, that way it can grow. And so Solomon wisely took the child from the hands of the lying woman and restored the baby to the rightful mother. And that's wisdom that comes from God. Solomon's reputation after this, it grew instantly as a king who ruled with wisdom from God, because All of Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged. They revered him and knew that the wisdom of God was in him. Consider what God was able to use Solomon to accomplish once the ruler of Israel had the attention and respect of the people that he ruled. Like I said, his fame spread far and wide. Everybody knew who Solomon was. There, he had all the gold he could ever want. He had so much gold that they said that silver was as common as stone. There was so many riches that was poured out into his kingdom, just people wanting to give him gifts. He had everything that he could ever want. However, he let it get the best of him, and I challenge you to go in, read the rest of the story of Solomon. Even in all of his wisdom, he was not able to outsmart all of the bad situations that he brought in to his life in his later years. But what I want you to do, as we finish up tonight, I want you to pray that God gives you wisdom and God gives you a discerning spirit to be able to rightly choose between what is right and what is wrong. That God leads you and that he guides you in whatever path, whatever calling, whatever he is leading you to do. And I challenge you to do it with boldness. Go forward. Just like King David did, just like King Solomon did. Regardless of your age, wherever you're at in your life, wherever your story is picking up, beginning or restarting, whatever challenges you may face, I want you to address them with a boldness and with a strength, knowing that God has ordained your steps and that he is leading you into this new season of your life with a renewed strength. Guys, thank you again. We're finished with our series of David and Solomon. I am so excited as we go into series 2 of this. Starting on Monday, we'll be talking about the parables of Jesus, which this is truly my favorite thing to teach on, is the parables, because for me, Jesus was the best teacher. And I love how he tells these earthly stories with the heavenly meaning. That ultimately, that's what a parable is. So tune in with me. I love you. Jesus loves you. I'll see you Sunday. I can't wait to be back in service with you on next Wednesday. But have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.